You're listening to Cinema Snarks. I'm Larry,
I'm Ren.
and we are going to tell you how we really feel. And today we're telling you how we feel about Candyman. Yes, the 2021 version of the film, directed and co-written by Nia DaCosta. Candyman tells the story of a struggling artist who finds inspiration in an old tale that haunts his neighborhood. But as he dives deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole, he soon finds out there may be more to this myth than he had originally anticipated. So, Candyman, the same name as the 1992 film, but it serves kind of like the 2018 Halloween film, in which it's actually a sequel to the film in which it shares a name, while also pretty much serving as a reboot for the franchise. Now, you haven't seen Halloween 2018 yet, correct?
I have not. That is going to be our, that's what we're planning to do. I've only seen the original Halloween, so we're planning
And
for
has lots of movie watching ahead of her.
month of October for Halloween. Ren's going to
Woo!
be watching all of the Halloween movies so that can have an opinion on them.
So we can't really compare that aspect of it, but you have seen Candyman from 1992.
I have. You not well, I was gonna say not last year because that was pandemic year. The year before that,
Mhm.
you brought to my attention how few of the like classic horror films I had actually like seen. And I'm not opposed to horror films. I think I just don't, they're not the first thing I think of to watch. So I just hadn't seen a lot of them. And I was like, this is a big blind spot in my like film history knowledge. I better get on top of this. And, like I see a lot of the more like indie films, but yeah, those like classic horror films I just like hadn't seen. And then last year for Halloween, I wrote a show that was basically a spoof of like classic horror film tropes. So I spent a very long time between 2019 and 2020 just like watching all of the like classic Halloween films. But Candyman was one that I watched in like 2019. And that was one of those. So when I started watching these classic horror films, my bar was kind of low. I just kind of like assumed, I don't know why, the originals are all really good. There's a reason
Yeah,
that they
it's
decided
the
to make 20 sequels. Yeah. And I had no idea that Candyman had like 20 sequels. I just knew that it existed. Didn't have like a ton of understanding of even what it was. It sounds silly. Like it doesn't sound like it's going to be
Yeah.
like a scary film. But it's really good. It's probably one of the, I think it's probably the most artistic, like all the way around, like horror film of that particular era. I mean, I guess when it came out in 1992,
Yeah.
I guess it's a
Just a
little
little
bit
bit
post, yeah,
later.
Halloween and yeah, Friday the 13th, but it does feel like it might be, and I'm sure there's like some horror film nerds that are gonna be like, absolutely not. But it does feel like it maybe is kind of like a slow, kind of a like a precursor to the like kind of slow burn and the like idea of horror to reflect larger social
Yeah.
horrors.
Yeah, that's definitely a staple mark, I think, when it comes to Candyman, is horror as a genre has always played with lots of subtext. One way or another, they like to infuse it either with outdated moral lessons or they also like to inundate it with just like these sneaky little messages.
You're talking about like the final girls that like don't have sex and don't get killed, and the ones who are like
Yes.
sluts always get murdered first.
Well,
Yeah.
particularly that started, I mean, Halloween, we see that present
Yeah.
there, but
She's kind of the
particularly,
original final girl.
yeah, I mean, and she's, let's be real, we can debate on who our favorites are.
This is
She's
the
still the
ultimate
most iconic.
final girl. Yeah.
She's the iconic final girl. But it started there. And then, especially when we got into the 80s, of course, society as a whole really went into Puritan mode. AIDS, war on drugs.
70s was a goddamn free for all. They're like,
Yeah.
ah, disco, woo woo. And
So
the
they
60s,
really doubled
like,
down.
condom, what's that? So
Yeah.
the 80s, they were like, all right, guys, we're gonna need to like
Yeah.
simmer down. Ronald Reagan is the
Yeah.
president now, and
Reagan. So I think horror also reflected that, and they really kind of doubled down on the don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, because if you do, this serial killer's gonna get you. It's
but
just
because that's never like the actual like ostensible reason that the serial killers are always just like fucking crazy. They're just murdering whoever is there. So, but there's this subconscious thing of like, well, those irresponsible children, that's what happened.
and yeah, the final girl is typically the level-headed virgin who is able to navigate her way through all of this. And of course, we poke a lot of fun at this in movies like Scream, which kind of ushered in a new era of the slasher film.
Cabin in the Woods, I think, did a great job of like
Cabin in the Woods,
really
yeah, really
examining
goes after it.
tropes. Yeah, like full on, like let's look
Yeah.
at the tropes. Yeah.
But when you look at it, none were quite as overt in a social commentary as Candyman was. And honestly, we didn't see much for a while after Candyman either. And it kind of sits in this weird place of almost like cult classic type of horror, because it's not one that a lot of people put up there with the likes of Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. But it's, as you said, you had heard of it. It's one that stayed long enough and it got those sequels. So it stuck around. It's just not on the like mega level as some of the other slashers.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is honestly, I think it's on kind of a different level from Halloween and Friday the 13th and those other and Chucky and things like that. Like it just in terms of like a horror film, right? Like we're talking about like, oh, these ostensible sort of like social commentaries. Candyman actually takes like a real problem and like real things that exist and are like actually horrifying, and it isn't a morality tale in that sort of way. It's in a look at this crazy fucked up shit that has happened and like it just kind of like, you know, plays with that. I really enjoy the way that it plays with that idea of how evil is generated, you know, but it's like the whole thing that like American Horror Story bases everything on is like there's like these, you know, evil acts breed evil energies sort of idea, and Candyman's one of the first ones to like really look at this evil as a force, as a like magic sort of thing.
And I think as we talked about it, we'll kind of let that be a good segue point into the current film. We both really enjoyed that this new film took that and just gave it more depth, because it's definitely there, but we don't really get to delve into all of that. And this film doesn't really take its time to do it. It doesn't, like I Don't Bill, really preach at you the whole time. It just fleshes out this mythology and gives you more tools to adequately at least explain this idea behind the horrors that stain a community or stain a system.
It does seem to, so it's like ostensibly like a sequel to the original Candyman, but I think it also kind of like it adjusts the lore of Candyman into the context of its new plot line and the new like purpose. We're not going to spoil anything. It's slightly different. It's not a straight line from like the plot and the like specifics of the original Candyman to this one. And so I just wanted to say part of the reason that I was interested in this one is it's written by Clive Barker. I think that's probably another piece of like the puzzle of why it is so good. Is it's not like film dudes that want to make a slasher film. It's like a horror dude who just writes horror stories all the time, and that's just his jam. And they like took one of his like horror stories and turned it into this film.
Yes, it is a sequel by character standard and by situations. I mean, we directly reference that
Timeline
too.
wise,
Yes,
yes.
we directly reference that first one, and then
Yes.
they just it's almost like one of those moments where they add to the story which changes what we knew type of thing. Like, okay, you didn't get the full, idea of the myth.
That was something I really liked about it is it seems like especially right now a good portion of the like horror movie just reboots in general sequels it's a reboot, right? It's like we're just going to kind of remake this old thing, and it's kind of refreshing to have something that actually takes the source material and like acknowledges it and says this was a sick ass movie and we want to take what was great about this film and continue on in the context of this new one. So
I
like
would
you
like to
get
think they hopefully learned from what they did in the 2000s with A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, and most infamously, those Rob Zombie Halloween films, where they completely just retconned these horror icons to give them these horrible backstories that nobody wants.
I think it's a testament to how bad it is that like I haven't watched them, but I know that it just like goes off the rails and makes no sense after a while.
Just like, especially Rob Zombies. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I
Isn't
guess like
I think Mike Myers is like magic or something like that. I think that's
it's
what I
just
heard.
horrible, and then they add in this like sexual assault stuff. It's just terrible. I really don't like those Rob Zombie
Great. I'm
Halloween
really excited
films.
to watch all of them.
Yeah, but I think maybe hopefully we're starting to be like, okay, how can we reinvigorate these franchises in other ways? And I think Candyman works too because again, it's not one. It does have quite a few sequels, but they're not getting like the theatrical releases like all of these other ones. It's not like just constantly the same guy over and over every few years. We're getting
I
new
literally had
film.
no idea that Candyman had any sequels. I was like, oh, how nice. Just a good like piece of horror. Yeah, we were talking
And
about like
no,
what movies we should talk about today. And you were I was like with the Candyman discussion. And you're like, oh, like the Candyman sequels? What?
what?
They
Oh,
have
there are. Okay.
no idea. I mean, and I think that in and of itself is kind of interesting because like I absolutely knew that there was a million sequels to every other one of these, Friday the 13th, blah, blah, blah. But like Candyman has its own little like separate world, I guess, its
Yeah.
separate level. I mean, again, it does kind of come from a different time period, but I don't. The Chucky movies came out in
Chucky
what
movie. Yeah.
1989,
Yeah,
not
like
that
late
like
80s.
yeah,
Yeah,
not
not
that.
that much. And even other ones that came out around the same time that are around, I would say probably in the same
Mhm.
tier level as
Mhm.
Candyman, like Hellraiser, that has 1,000,001
Oh,
sequels.
yeah.
Like there's a lot of those, that level of horror that they just spawn sequel after sequel after sequel. But with this film, first I want to talk about how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
Just from a filmmaking standpoint, Nia DaCosta is the director here, and I love what she did, and the director of photography both, um, with the look of this movie. It's gorgeous.
I that's I think I'm just gonna spoil this real quick. I love that at the very beginning, and you like leaned over and told me that you were totally tricked. That at the very beginning, all of the like credits are reversed as if you're like looking at it in the mirror. And like I immediately was like, oh, it's like the mirror, like with the Candyman. And apparently Larry was like,
Well,
screwed up the projection.
I've been burned twice this year already to where we had to like leave or wait hours because they
Oh
screwed up the
no.
projector. So that's twice in the exact same theater that we watched it in. And so I was like,
You had already like you were
I was like,
scarred a
not
little
again.
bit.
Did you want to mess up another one? No, but I didn't get up or act hastily. I was like, I need to see a shot of the film itself before I actually get mad.
So
But
I
yeah,
do feel like, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like they really played with the mirror thing a lot more in this movie than they did in the original Candyman. Like, I don't really, I feel like the Candyman thing was like you basically like summoned him and then he was just around. It didn't feel like it was as much very centered on the mirror aspect. I don't know if maybe I'm just misremembering it, but the mirror theme was really, really hammered in this one, which
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to. I think
And I
it lends
love how they
to a lot
played
of
with
really
that.
cool cinematography.
Yeah, that's what I
Because
was
there
gonna
was
say. I
so
love
many of
that they
those.
use that to their advantage to
Mhm.
create new looks and like more inventive ways to really play with mirrors.
And also from a person who's ever tried to like film near a mirror before, that is it's kind of a little bit of impressive filmmaking when you just have mirrors everywhere because you have to make sure that like you can see everything, but also the mirror doesn't see you and all of your cameras and everything that's happening. It's actually it's kind of tricky. A
Yeah,
lot of times they just like don't actually have a mirror at all. It just like looks kind of like
yeah,
a mirror. Yeah. But yes, I
yeah.
thought the mirror
It's
trope was really cool and that created that really neat cinematography, these really moody sort of just like establishing shots of Chicago.
And
Like
even so, it was pointed out because I hadn't really noticed the opening to the original Candyman is like a bird's eye view of that neighborhood of the city, and then this one does like an
greeny green.
upward, yeah, Cabrini Green, but like an upward view at the new city. So it's almost like an inverse look at the same stuff as the first one, which I thought again playing with that idea of mirroring.
I
I
love
thought it
when,
was really
like
cool.
I love when directors do that where it's like this super this very specific idea that they had and they know that nobody's probably gonna like notice it. There's gonna be like two people that see it and they're
Yeah,
like, it's this thing from the original thing, it's the thing. And like I appreciate that
yeah.
she it does seem very much like she loved the original film and really wanted to like watched it over and over again and had like a lot of love for it and a lot of desire to bring what was important about that film to her into the remake.
And we discussed this as well, and I think it bleeds over from the original. I think that she does a great job at replicating the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So it's not like a remake in that sense. She's not copying the original film really at all when it comes to like story beats or anything,
Yeah.
but they feel very
Moodiness.
similar.
Yeah. It was kind of a weird thing to try and explain because you just feel it. It's interesting because like horror movies, they have different feels, right? Like, we're talking about Halloween has a different feel from Candyman. Chucky has a different feel from Friday the 13th. Like they're similar, they're in similar genres. And Candyman has this very like moody, thoughtful, kind of mysterious sort of vibe that I think was what made it unique in that context of the other horror films of that time period. And yeah, she did an amazing job of recreating that. I think it has a lot to do with the pacing of the shots. The music is a big part of it. That like the soundtrack was fantastic. I mean, uh, anybody who does sound will tell you that horror movies are made in the sound. Like if you do not nail the sound design of your horror movie, it's gonna suck. It's actually so I started and I came up from the theater world and started as in sound design. And the shows that I started doing when I like started my own theater company, I started with horror shows because I really just wanted to sound design a horror show because there's it's so much fun and there's so much to play with there and you get to spend a lot more time messing with people's emotions. You don't get to do that with a lot of other things. Like I've said it before, I think when we watched Midsummer, one of the things I really like about horror is I think that it is I think in terms of film, you get to do the most filmy things with horror films. You really get to play with cinematography. You get to put a lot of symbolism in there. You really get to play with all of the colors and the tension and the sound. Like you really get to mess around with how things visually and orally AURALLY um affect your audience in horror films in a way that
Honestly, it
with
makes
a
me
lot of
frustrated that sometimes that horror gets like, I don't know, the like trash bin treatment of cinema.
it.
Be-
The problem is that like it's also very easy to just make like gore fests, which like don't get me wrong, I love a good gore fest as long as like the gore is creative Oh, and we can talk about that in Candyman as well. But yeah, you get, it's also really easy to make B horror films.
Yes,
There's
it's
like a
easy.
lot of B horror films, but then when you make like an artistic horror film, those are like, I think those are some of the most artistic films that are made,
It's
period.
true. Yeah, because honestly, there's no genre that relies more on mood and atmosphere than horror. And as you said, like sound design plays a huge role.
Mhm.
Probably, I mean, I guess you could say musicals, possibly war films, and horror are like the top things in
Mhm.
which sound design is essential
Yeah.
to creating your film. If that fails, your film is going to fail because it's just
Mhm.
not going to work.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, everything from makeup to costuming to prosthetics,
Yeah.
everything about horror should be like filmmaking.
Yes. Every like piece of the filmmaking puzzle has to be like on point if you're gonna
And
do a
I
horror
think maybe
film.
that's why it's so easy to fumble. Is
Yeah.
because you have to have all these
There's so
pieces,
many bad ones.
and if you don't nail them, then it comes across cheesy. Or if you fumble these things and aren't up to doing what you need to do, then it's like, okay, well, that was a schlock horror
Yeah.
movie.
My favorite sound design story all time is how when they did early screenings of Halloween before they had added in all of the sound, that audiences laughed. They just thought it was like a comedy. It was just so funny. And it didn't get scary until that like iconic orchestration was added to the background that really made people go, oh, good. Created the right amount of
And
tension.
that's the thing, especially with like Candyman, is they also really play with the idea that he is a ghost. It is like a
Mhm.
spirit, and we get a lot of shots where we go in and out of like having him present and then switching vantage points and he's gone and we just see like the dead
Which is
body or like the body's
So
floating.
that's something that I love about Candyman is like I I think ghosts are the scariest fucking thing of the like things that are scary. I think ghosts are the scariest. That is just the thing that gets me and is like terrifying. So a ghost that can actually murder you is extra scary to me. So I think that's what like Mike Myers is like, oh, that's a dude, right? Texas Chainsaw Max, it's a dude. Like dudes that are running after me. I mean, like that's scary, but it's also like that is a stoppable force. I don't know how to stop somebody who's already dead.
Ren also has like a weird love of serial killers, so I think
Yes. Well, I've done a lot of research, so I feel like I'm more confident about my ability to avoid being murdered by a human.
yeah. So when she sees men running around with knives and chainsaws and stuff, not as scary for her, but
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about Candyman is multiple times in the film you have people that are like, absolutely not. I will not do that thing that you do in a horror movie and ends up getting you killed. Like, I will not be summoning Candyman. Do not. Absolutely not. I am not going down into that dark basement. That's just dumb. I appreciated that ability to it was just that like little bit of poking fun and enough to make me go, thank you. Right. And
yeah.
because as you're watching Candyman, I like literally turned to Larry in the theater and I was like, these fucking people that just keep on saying the candy. There's two murders. And they're like, oh, it. What? What is wrong with these people?
And I love it because again, it does kind of poke fun at tropes that happen, and it's one of those instances that you can use a I guess more positive stereotype of race to your advantage of we have the memes like white people at it again, white people doing stupid shit all the time. And Candyman utilizes that and actually flips the trope because you're always like, why would the black people be the first friend to die? Like, I'm sorry.
They're the ones that are like, I'm out. Peace.
Yeah, this depiction is a lot more accurate to what I think a lot of the situations would be like, hell no.
I used to live in Philadelphia. There's like one movie theater in particular that if you go see a horror movie in this area with a very large black community, so most of the people in the movie theater, they are just yelling at the screen the whole time, telling everyone to stop. Please stop. Like,
Yeah.
I agree. They're absolutely right.
So it's like, yeah, why is the black friend been the one that always dies first? It doesn't.
The black people are the ones who, I mean, like realistically, the black people are the ones who are always running, right? Let's go into the like seriousness of it. Like which is what they kind of dive into, is that Black people are used to being chased. They are used to being the object of a
real life horror.
Yeah. So they're not, they don't mess around just like hanging out
with ghosts and shit in the mirror.
which is what I really liked about which they really dig into in Candyman. But it's one of the best examples of artful examples of privilege that I think you could like. It's just, you watch these white people that can't imagine that anything could possibly happen to them. They just live in this world where there are no consequences for any of their actions. And then you have all these Black people that are well aware that there are consequences to their fucking actions.
And they do it in a very articulate manner too, of like the white people who do this that are like completely dismissive of whatever's, this myth that's being thrown at them.
And the white people are also assholes. They're the worst kinds of white people. I think they do a really good job in this film. I was telling Larry, the main character he's an artist, he's a painter. And so a lot of this movie is set in the art world, which I think is an amazing fucking place to set this kind of a plot, because the art world is 100% just dictated by what the people in power have decided is good. It is completely fucking arbitrary. It has nothing to do with like your skill or your ability to like actually work your way to the top. It is literally, I need this dude over here that runs a gallery to put my work in front of the people who are going to write more shit about it. And it's, I love art. I love going to art museums. I'm not saying that like art people suck or anything. I am saying that the industry is not like, it's just, I could write, there are literally books and books and books and books and books about the completely arbitrary nature of the value of art. And so it was a great place to put a couple of Black people who are effectively trying to convey that their art has worth and that they themselves have worth.
Of course, the history of art is also, it's elitist in several different ways. It's including nationalism in its thing, other than just, race and thievery, as we all know as well. Stealing concepts from places that are not yours, or ideas that are not yours. That's prevalent in all of the arts, certainly. But I agree. It certainly is a good pick up for this plot.
That was one of the only unbelievable things that I found in the movie, was that the artist, he basically creates this art piece where it's a mirror, and then you open the mirror, and then all of the paintings that he's drawn to kind of represent Candyman in this lore is inside of the mirror. And everybody's like, no, it's so tried, it's so overdone. And like, that's bullshit. Everybody's all about immersive things right now. If that showed up in an art gallery, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I love how interactive it is. Oh, it's wonderful. I love the concept. It's so dramatic. Like, people would fucking love that shit. Like, they would eat it right fucking up.
And there would be dead people pretty quick, I feel, because I feel like they would go with it.
They would 100%. And so I'm like wondering about like, was it intentional that she made something that actually is really cool, or is she just so good an artist that she couldn't make something stupid that was like probably stupid and people might like mock as being like, right? Yeah. My thinking is that she wanted it to be something that was relatively cool, and that people just like were shitty about the concept that they, gentrification. I loved that. I really enjoyed the way that they had these art people basically saying that the concept of talking about gentrification is just so overdone. It's still a thing that happens
all the time.
all the
Like
time.
constantly, everywhere you look, you'll find examples of it
Yeah.
in every major city across the country.
Um, okay, so also really quick, I want to backtrack to something we were talking about with gore, right? So I
Yes.
love gore porn. That's a weird way to say that. But like
Torture porn.
that also feels weird.
Yeah,
I
that's the phrase I guess I've heard for so damn long that
It's
it
true. It
rings
is
true to
weird
my
though.
ear.
It's odd. So I've done right. I've done a lot of special effects, makeup, things like that. So I'm fascinated by people's ability to make gore happen, especially like to create this vision of something happening that makes you physically go ugh, or just this really creative way of ripping people apart in two. Like I think Mortal Kombat does an awesome job of like finding new ways to like murder people. And so like because special effects have gotten so good, it really has gotten all about like the most completely creative ways you can come up with to murder people, which I enjoy watching and seeing people's creativity. Look at this crazy! Oh, look, like a saw blade went flying through the air and through their head. Crazy. But this movie doesn't really lean into that as much. A lot more happens off screen. And I know, Larry, you had mentioned that some people were upset about that.
Yeah.
And I think I disagree, obviously, because I'm bringing it up and I'm on the Cinema Snarks talking
I
about
disagree too.
wrong. Um, like that was what the way that the gore was depicted made it really, really interesting and made it different. And it wasn't about all of the gore. There was just these really creative, artistic ways of looking at the gore and incorporating things. And I have never been, it has been a really long time since I have seen gore that actually made me uncomfortable. And they have this thing, this like skin thing that is so uncomfortable. The whole thing is like, I'm like getting goosebumps now, like just thinking about it.
Oof.
And that is somebody who did a really, really good job of taking something that it's subtle, but it is like good, like actually
That's another thing is there's something to say about a skin thing that is somewhat familiar, to all of us. Scabs are something that are familiar. Even having a scab pulled off or something is very familiar to pretty much everyone. We can identify with it. But to make it look realistic enough, but yet gross enough, but it's like stays in believability. I think there's something to say about that rather than just always the like slicing of a head open, which is something we theoretically like we can conceptualize, but we're not seeing heads get sliced off and stuff in our everyday life.
Yeah. So they did that with all the scabs, and I looked up the name. So there's this thing, and I've heard people talk about it a few times. It's called trypophobia, and it's basically like this thing that makes some people deeply uncomfortable. It's like those kind of holy textures. Makes people feel like awkward. Like it's like those seed pods and things. Like sometimes just looking at them just like freaks certain people out. And they created this holy texture on somebody's skin. And I just think that's so smart. It's such a clever way to make people uncomfortable with your makeup design in like a simple way, in a visceral but simple, not like leaning super into creative, like how do I rip people's bodies apart. So I just thought, again, we were talking about horror films where you basically everything has to be on point. I thought that everything in this film was just on point. There wasn't anything that bothered me. Oh, and the puppets, love the shadow puppets.
Ren loves a good puppet.
I love me some puppets. The shadow puppets are also, they were a part of the original Candyman, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great thing to kind of like carry over, and it's a common theme I've seen a lot in like horror folk tales. It's commonly
puppets in general are pretty horror centric. We get freaked out by them puppets easily. Puppets and dolls.
Yeah, and there were so many very cool and the theme was carried through really, really well with the puppetry, and they had that whole thing at the ending credits, and all these people were leaving during the credits, and there's this beautiful shadow puppetry video happening, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with people?
Sit your ass down.
Listen, adults see puppets and their brains turn off because they're like children, and it doesn't matter that you were just at fucking Candyman. And obviously, these puppets are not for children. People's brains just turn off when they're like, puppets are for kids. I'm gonna go now. Yeah. Well, I don't care about puppets. Ugh, we don't understand any of the implications. I'm not gonna.
But I think we'd be a little bit remiss if we didn't just touch on our cast as well. Yes. First off, I just have to start off because I am perpetually a thirsty beach up in here. Yahya Abdul-Mateen looked amazing.
I'm glad you just knew his name like bam. God, that guy's hot. Agreed.
It's like Lord have mercy. Like there's a scene early on, he comes about that bathroom and you're just like, oh
yes, please, Nia.
Oh
this and is what we need women directors.
And I love too, because Tiana Paris is also gorgeous and she looks great in this film too. But I love in that particular scene, she is just an average woman. She's got her hair wrapped up. She's got just, she looks like she's ready for bed.
Yeah.
There's no sexy, like, oh yeah, no. And he comes out of that bathroom and you're like, oh damn. But
she was also a really good she was a great character, and I think I enjoyed, she subverted a lot of the female lead in a horror movie kind of final girl tropes.
Yeah, she was great. I thought she was really good. I thought they also had a really good chemistry. The brother also was wonderful. He provided, like, that's the thing, is you mentioned it with the characters being like, nah, I'm good, and walking away.
Yeah.
This film does a lot of really good, like, comedy beats. So, because sometimes in horror, those comedy beats obviously can just ruin the mood. Like, again, horror's all about creating that atmosphere. I think this film dropped them at good times, whether it be with that brother character or those characters just being like, I'm out of here, whatever it was.
It was employed really effectively to make you like the characters that you are watching, as opposed to just like jarring you in the middle of what you're watching. And sometimes that is an effective use of comedy. I think a really good horror comedy person is able to like pull the tension string and then snap it with a joke in just the right way. And this movie did do that in a few ways, but it also just like had fun jokes that were in there that weren't intended to do anything but like convey the types of people that these people are, and it's kind of like make you enjoy the world that you were in with these real life humans, as opposed to like, and I think that's some place where it's like definitely improved, because I definitely don't think that Virginia Madsen's character in the original Candyman is like super relatable at all. Like she's kind of like this, I don't know, she's a grad student and she's like, you just don't know very much about like her. Her husband's a douchebag. That's about it. And like, you don't get to really identify with her a lot. You don't even really get to identify with the Candyman character. Like, you hear their background. Yeah. There's just no connection with any of the characters really in the original Candyman, but in this Candyman, you feel something for all of them. There's even, as you're watching the Anthony McCoy character kind of like slowly losing his mind, he has lots of moments where he's charming and you like him and you understand why Brianna, who's the Tiana Parrish character, likes him as well. He's hot and like funny and cute and like charming. I love he goes in to get like the he's romance. He's just slight flirting, not even flirting, just like giving her a look. He's like, I'm sexy. You want to give me things here, librarian?
This woman is just like, she comes back up and it's like, oh,
I don't know. I absolutely would have been that woman. Like,
Oh yeah, how did you find
Yeah,
this?
weird.
But yeah, I thought Colby Domingo was a lot of fun in this movie. He gets to be like
Yeah,
a little bit weird,
yeah.
a little weirder than he usually is in films that I've seen. But even as you mentioned, like the critic woman, I thought did great.
Yes.
Everybody just portrayed the role they were brought in to do very well. There was nobody who just like took you out to be like, what the, who the hell's this? Like,
None of the actors is like a super well known. Actually, honestly, the only one was Tiana Parrish, and like it was. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little distracting for me because I was like, I know I've seen this woman. I know I saw her in Mad Men, but there was another thing more recently that I saw her in, and I spent like the whole time looking at her face, trying to remember where I'd seen her from, which I didn't do with any of the other characters, which I really enjoyed.
you may have. I was like, I don't know. He has his face covered in a lot of it. But yeah, Yaya is from Aquaman, Ren, and he will be in Aquaman 2 as well.
What is
He's
he in Aquaman?
the Black Manta. Um, he
Okay.
wears he's the attack from the land basically when Aquaman
Okay,
goes up
sure.
into Italy. But anyway,
All
secondary villain, obviously Patrick Wilson was the main. But
right.
yeah, so I think we're both in agreement. We both came out really enjoying the film. Am I right, Ren?
For sure. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
real quick, while we're talking about actors, quick shout out to Vanessa Williams, not
Yes.
Vanessa Williams.
Uh,
Williams, who was in the original Candyman and was also in this Candyman, and looks like she has not aged a day in 20 years,
say
30 years.
we want to talk about looking good. She looks good. Like, yeah.
I was watching it thinking this woman looks very young to be his mother. Oh, wow. She is old enough to be his mother. Wow.
Also, give her some more roles, I think. I thought she was so good in this very small role. She's not in the film that much. She's so good. She has such a presence about her when she's on that screen.
Yeah. She's great. Anyway, so
Yes.
we
Now,
liked Candyman. You should go
yes.
see it.
Now that leads us to a little bit larger of a discussion. It's more of a free flow than typically we have more of a set theme, but this week or this review and our upcoming review are going to be a little bit more open. We're just basically talking about how diversity has evolved. So we did talk a lot about Candyman, so we're not really going to discuss that one as much because we got into it quite a bit at the beginning of this review. But that was one of the first films in the horror genre that not only had a largely Black cast, though our main focus is a white woman, but
which they definitely talk about in Candyman.
yes. But
people die, one white lady dies in the hood, and everybody knows about it.
Yes. Where our villain is also Black, and it's not like a oh this horrible Black person killing white people type thing, and that more so talks about a race issue. I think that's what really sets Candyman is what it's saying. So horror has had a weird trajectory when it comes to all types of diversity. It's kind of been there. They've always like teetered on wanting to push boundaries.
So like I was saying, Night of the Living Dead, the main character is a Black guy. The like main person, and it was a Black guy and a white woman in a couple. And oh my God, George Romero, he didn't pick a Black guy for any reason other than he was the best actor, which I kind of love. There's definitely something to be said for these horror films that we have now that can kind of contextualize Black trauma in the world of horror. But I also think it's very important for Black people to also just be normal people that experience normal thing. Well, I guess zombies not super normal, but
but to get like, those films, to get zombie films, to get werewolves or
to a white person on film can also happen to a Black person on film, right?
Sure, whatever the case is. Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing, right? Like we would love to see a group of Black teenagers trying to figure out how to kill Freddy Krueger, which we haven't seen. It's
we
always
haven't
a bunch of
seen.
little white kids.
We've
Now,
got.
to be fair, we just talked about the white kids are the stupid ones.
I will say Freddy Krueger is definitely one though. Everybody has to sleep. So
yes, that's true.
he is a lot more amiable to any group anywhere in the world. Whereas like Jason, again, you got to be out in the woods and snooping around some damn cabin.
Camp, which
You have to be around.
camps, huh?
I mean, Friday the 13th is
economic sort of level you want to be at summer camp.
But that one, I guess, has its own place in history. It's one of the few female killers that we have, just straight up female killers in the first Friday the 13th.
Spoil Friday the 13th that came out 40 years ago.
I was going to say, Bren, did you not watch the first one or did you watch the second one?
No. I watched the first one. I think
I was like,
too.
Yeah, did you just skip straight to Jason being the killer?
I'm just kidding you for spoiling that it's Jason Voorhees' mom at the end.
Well, it's very few, still to this day, very few people of color as the killers, very few females as the killers. It's still mostly ominous white dudes as like serial killers.
Weird because it feels like it literally is very early on. They make a diverse, interesting choice. And then they slide it over into the boring, just the whole cast is white all the time. It's very weird, right? Like the first Voorhees, the killer is a 50-year-old woman. It's obviously underrepresented character.
All the way around.
Actor, like gender and age. Same thing with Night of the Living Dead. You have a black person. And then like Walking Dead is like almost all white people. I'm not a huge fan of zombie movies in general, so I can't give you a lot of references.
Most of them, I mean, and that's the thing. We were talking about The Final Girl, which is obviously a huge horror trope. It's the slasher trope is the final girl, which is, I think, good and a little bit negative. Final girls are fun to root for. You like seeing a woman kind of find her power throughout the film and come out alive. As everybody around her falls and dies.
Right. And like that's the thing that we have to I have to, say snaps for in like the context of film history. The final girls are some of the first women that have any agency whatsoever. They're the ones that like look around and are like, holy shit, all of my friends are dead. Now I need to figure out how to leave, right? As opposed to their friends up until that point are just like blindly walking into murder scenarios.
Yeah.
So they're the smart ones. They're the fighters. They're the ones that like come out on top, which is, you don't see that. You don't get as many female action heroes like that are like the badasses that figure it out.
And one of the most iconic female action heroes started in mostly a horror film with Alien. I mean, Ripley is a final girl and she's like an action badass, but she had to figure it out and survive.
It is fascinating how we film manages to subvert a trope, and then when you're like, women can't lead action films, and you like point to this super, super famous one that came out a really long time ago, and they're like, no, but we don't mean that. It's like,
or you're James Cameron, who's like,
it doesn't matter how many times you prove that Black people can be the lead in your horror film, or women are capable of being smart and carrying an action film, that it still just keeps on diverting back to this white male patriarchal sort of vision of the world.
And even The Final Girl, we were trying to think of it, and I had a hard time. Like, it took me a hot minute to really think and go through to think of non-white final girls. So that's still a mostly white women's club as the final girl.
You did identify one from the Escape Room movie, and then I identified a final boy.
Which is rare in and of itself.
I know. Well, so I remembered, if you've ever seen House on Haunted Hill, Taye Diggs and the girl who's the final girl, but both of them managed to get out alive. So there's a final girl and a final guy, which is actually a little bit of a interesting, different trope. To have a couple
like AVP, like Alien vs Predator, has a Black final girl.
Okay.
There's like a few instances in a slasher film, but it's really rare. And then
I was trying to think if there's even any like Hispanic
yeah, one that I can think of.
girls. Yeah, I actually was thinking like I think there's a pretty decent amount of I'm not there's not enough obviously. We do have some like we have an awesome black horror voice out there right now and is also elevating other black horror filmmakers.
Mhm.
Um but I really don't think we get enough horror from the Latino community. Like apart from Mexican films that are horror films and actually like from Latin
Set in
America.
Mexico.
Yeah,
So I
that are
say
like
when they set it in the US, even Mexican filmmakers don't cast Latino people in their leads.
yes.
Partially, probably because they're trying to get their
Yeah.
film made. Like Guillermo del Toro has made, a history of filmmaking in the horror-y.
I was like, Pan's
Um,
Labyrinth is like, huh? I don't know if Pan's Labyrinth is horror or just fucked up.
but like you said, Edgar Ramiro, there's a lot of Mexican voices certainly
Mhm.
running around the horror-y aspects, but they don't really get in there. We
Mhm.
also talked about the whitewashing, and I think that's what has kept Asian people out of leads.
Right?
Is instead of watching the original films, we remake most Japanese horror films, and then we cast Sarah Michelle Gellar and we cast Naomi Watts.
You know what's fucked up is when they cast all of the main characters as white people, but the monsters are still Asian
Still
people.
Asian.
That's kind of fucked up. They're like, aren't these little Asian girls scary? Hey,
Yeah.
they were scary, but the entire cast was terrifying. Here's the other thing is Asian people have fucking terrifying folklore. Just absolutely horrifying folklore. There's this one, I do a lot of research on horror and things. There's this thing called a krashu, and there's different versions in different cultures all over Asia, but it's basically this woman whose head comes off of her body at night, and she like sneaks in, and she like it flies around with this headless mess with like blood coming down and goes and like uses her tongue to steal fetuses out of pregnant ladies. And they put spikes up on their the people in these Asian countries put spikes up on their fences so that it keeps these monsters away, because otherwise their intestines that are trailing out underneath their disembodied heads that have separated from their bodies will get tangled up in the spikes. That is just an example of some of the
Crazy
horrifying shit that Asians have in their like
culture,
folklore lexicon
yeah.
that I would love to see more of.
Yeah, and it's just such a shame that we do continue to do that. Because they even remade The Grudge. You would like to be like, oh, we're doing better. It was also a very, very loose sequel. It was terrible. The latest Grudge that they made,
With
like
John
2 years ago with John Cho, was terrible.
But
But
they
John
did,
Cho,
man.
they put an Asian man there, but he wasn't even really the main character. The white woman was the main character again. And you're like, we've come so far in so many ways, but we're still remaking Asian movies into American movies and recasting. They're redoing Train to Busan, which is another like horror thing that film Twitter loves. It's like a horror kind of action. We'll see how they cast that.
So like I understand to a point this idea that Americans won't watch something that doesn't have white people in it, and Americans don't like to read. Like, I guess I understand that. But then I'm trying to reconcile that with we make films specifically with the intention of marketing them to Asian markets.
Yeah.
So I just don't like, I don't know. I think I imagine that trend is going to start to change. And I think we're going to end up with, at the very least, we're going to have English speaking Asian people
yes.
In these horror remakes because they're because a huge portion of the market is Asian people that would probably like to see.
Yeah. I mean, and of course it happened, and Asian properties being made whitewashed has been probably one of the most predominant things of the 20th century or the 21st century, because I mean, from Dragon Ball to all these anime properties, Ghost in the Shell. I mean, because anime is huge.
We talked about Avatar: The Last Airbender when we were
Yeah,
covering M. Night Shyamalan.
there are so many that have
An
been
Asian man.
adapted by an Asian man. Like, so that but let's hope. But we did have a Latino version. So within the Conjuring universe, recently they remade, or not remade, but they made a film, The Curse of La Llorona.
Which is another terrifying piece of folklore. I did a whole play about folklore from around the world. So that's why I'm like over here like, listen, there is some fucked up stories we should be telling, because it's
La Llorona, of course, any kid, any Latino kid was told about La Llorona growing up. So we all know that little folklore to get our ass back inside at night.
I'm hoping, I am imagining that this trend will, that the trend will be for more diversity, and we will ideally, the proportion of the population that is Latino just keeps getting bigger. And so I can't imagine us not having more films that are coming from this demographic, for this demographic, about this demographics. It's creepy ass folklore.
Yeah.
Honestly, white people have like okay folklore. To be honest, like we've got like a few things. We've got like
even like stuff in America, like the chupacabra, obviously. Right, it's like comes up to Texas, but
yeah, like chupacabra. It's like, yeah, it's like American, but it's like it's also very like Southwest. There's like Hispanic American,
straight from the name, like the name itself.
You have this like Paley Poe thing that like lives in the Appalachians, and that's like a thing. But like we don't have the terrifying fucking shit that other cultures have. We just don't. I don't know why.
I mean, just speaking from the like Mexican stuff, I think maybe. Well, no, that's not true, especially in a lot of Mediterranean countries. But there's just this like scare your kids into behaving themselves mentality. Yeah. So you scare their ass so they don't step out of line.
I'm thinking about like, oh, the Irish don't really, I mean, like, they don't have anything really that's scary. They have like things that are cute and then drop you that like drown you, but like they don't have anything that's like, there's nothing like the crash shoe that's like literally fucking terrifying. That is
makes me think, yeah, I hope it does move forward. And again, we talked about this when we talked about the Purge films in our 4th of July thing, but I'm going to bring them up again here because I know people find them heavy-handed, and I won't deny that. They come in with an iron fist with their political and socio-economic messages.
The Hunger Games horror
literally comes from a concept of like kill the effing rich, and like the rich are doing what they can to kill poor people off, and that's how they view you, as something that is a burden, really, and we have to thin the herd every year. But what they've done is the first film was about a white family heavily, and then after that they really diversified it. So all of their casts have been, this last one was really heavily Latino and they were the main characters. There's been a black cast. It's much heavier on diversity than most casts in any other horror franchise. I think that's why I see a lot of more positive reviews coming out of classes of culture critics.
It seems like those are like, it seems like horror films are, and maybe I'm just like being biased, but it seems like horror films are pretty popular among the African American community. So it does seem strange that we don't have, but like Jordan Peele was the first one to be like, I would like to make horror films for Black people.
And that's the thing, is what I want to get away from is the Get Out copycats that have come out over the past few years, and they've spread out to other aspects.
Karen?
Oh, geez. Well, and there are several like Karen that have gone totally. We don't even need to see the film. That trailer showed me all I need to know about what this film is doing and saying, to just tell you. There are many Get Out copycats that have just gone wayward including Antebellum last year, which really thought it was saying something and all this bullshit. No, it was so misguided and so frustrating to watch. And you had Janelle Monae in the
I was
lead
at the film.
role. Like,
Good.
oh, the cast was amazing and they all gave it their go, but you were just like, this was flawed heavily from the script.
Uh-huh.
We do have some fun depictions, like Octavia Spencer and Ma, just getting to play this deranged woman.
Also, real quick shout out to horror Lovecraft Country,
Yes,
which was not a
Lovecraft Country.
film,
No,
but was significantly, that was a good, I wouldn't
yes,
say Get Out copycat, but it certainly is. It's like sci-fi horror that focuses on the horror of it focuses on Black trauma.
they
Basically.
used Lovecraft's work to tell an impactful story this time.
Right. Which is especially fun considering, from what I've heard, I haven't done a ton of research on it, so you can correct me. I'm pretty sure Lovecraft was a big old racist.
Yes, so that's what makes it, even though reclaiming that word.
Love it.
But
let's make that little fucker roll around in his grave.
But we both come from the LGBTQ community. That's another community that has had an interesting run with horror throughout the years. It's a big part of the queer community. I think partially because it's about being weird and feeling like an outsider one way or another, whether it be that final girl who obviously, at least gay men, and I'm sure gay women, love a strong woman coming through and kicking ass. So they love a final girl, but also it just has always had this otherness to it within the horror genre, which I think has always gravitated the queer community by and large, just like big horror people. Unfortunately, they have not, they've only done the coding for so damn long. Like, it has taken horror way too long to fully embrace the queer community in substantial ways. I watched this documentary about it, and I know you at least watched the film, but Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yeah.
Ruined a man's career, first of all.
Poor man.
Because he was gay and because of how he was told and how the script was written. He was a final boy, which this also probably had a lot to do with killing off the final boy. They're like, oh no, we can't have this. And the fact that that screenwriter still to this day like denies that he wrote that character to be gay like that is outrageous. But the whole film is gay. Freddie is acting gay. Everybody is gay.
It is so gay. There's like a whole.
They go to a club. They go to a damn BDSM gay bar.
Club. Okay, it is literally they literally filmed it at a gay club, so and it is also a gay club in the film. Like, it's not. There's only dudes there.
It's outrageous that they ever tried to deny it, and still to this day
they still do, because they can't. They don't want to admit that they ruined this poor dude's career.
Yeah,
so, and that was like, I'm trying to think of like other ones that kind of like
main characters.
Luckily, things have gotten a little bit better. You certainly have a lot more,
at least main side characters who don't die, like Candyman, where he's not the main character, but the brother plays a predominant role. And
we're talking about Freaky.
Freaky. Great. And that's a pretty diverse cast. It's like a little Latino gay boy, a black girl.
Freaky. I thought that was a super fun film.
Yeah. So they're
good horror comedy.
And they're fighting, they're smart.
I also enjoy an adult man pretending to be a teenage girl. I think that might just be one of my buttons.
Ren loves Jack Black, so that's all you need to know. That's her thing.
Also, I will say in that film there is something about, there's definitely like a little thing about like he likes her for her even when she's like,
that's him. Yeah, there was like a good, I actually really liked, it was awkward because obviously this old ass man, but it was still a really fun open sexuality type of question to be brought up. I thought that little kid was fun. We've gotten a few smaller ones that have debuted on like specific platforms. One of them is a Get Out copycat, where this gay couple, interracial gay couple, comes to this town, and these town people are like, let's pretend to like the gays and trap them into some crazy thing. So there's fun stuff, but by and large, I think that's why the horror It's come a long way, certainly, to where we're getting overtness, and Get
Uh,
Out definitely helped that, I think, in so many ways. Just kick open that door. Certainly for Black horror, that genre has started to really come alive after Get Out, and you love to see it. And I think slowly but surely, as you said, we're still remaking Asian films. So I think I'm trying to hold that hope, especially with like Parasite finally winning and stuff like that, which isn't a horror film, but mm,
I mean,
it,
I think at the end of the day, Hollywood makes films that will make money, and the audiences have very clearly and loudly and vocally said, "We really want to see something that is not white people. We're kind of bored with the white people thing. We would like some news stories, please. Thank
yeah,
you."
thanks.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are, I'd say. Is yeah, we're finally seeing stuff make money. Nia DaCosta broke records this weekend, becoming the first Black female director to open up her film at number
Right.
one at the box office.
She's gonna do it again when
She's gonna repeat Captain Marvel 2. She'll be back at number one.
Like she and Tayana Paris are like besties,
Yeah,
huh?
Tana Paris coming back to be with her in Captain Marvel 2. We have Chloe Zhao directing that Eternals later this year. So
I don't know how I feel about
we
that.
might be getting our first ever female Asian director debuting at number one. I presume we will, since it's Marvel.
Yeah, it's Marvel.
So hopefully those doors are coming open. If we missed any big glaring examples, make sure to let us know in the comments. We'd
Real
love
quick,
to
I
check
just
them
wanted
out
to
if we
point
missed them.
out Teeth. That's a good feminist film, horror film that didn't get enough credit when it came out. Everybody was very uncomfortable with it, and I think it's a the big piece of like feminist horror. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation. I think like yeah, we should include women in the diversity conversation, but also I think white women have plenty of opportunities to be in horror films. So yeah, I think the feminism in horror films is like a whole separate topic that isn't as relevant here when we're talking about Candyman.
Yeah. So
but I did want to say, since we brought up the Final Girls, it is a good example of like a diverse sort of plot line that shows a different side of a minority group.
Yeah. Definitely let us know. Don't yell at us if your picks are like super niche.
But I know we are not you. We are not the super duper horror nerds.
We did not see this random film that 10 people watched. But leave those recommendations if you want down below. If they are full of diversity goodness, I'm sure either one of us would like to at least give it a shot. And of course, supporting films like Candyman and these diverse films that are actually quality and good. Yeah, none of that
garbage get out like
Karen bullshit. Karen is not a diversity, not a win for diversity, y'all. I just need you to realize that.
We think we might watch it and then just do an episode about terrible horror movies, which is its own wonderful sort of genre.
Pirate Karen is what I'm saying. Not saying, but saying.
Oh, don't give them your money.
Yeah, don't give them your money. Go ahead and watch and laugh and roast, but let's find ways around giving our money. But that was our review for Candyman 2021. I hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure that you are checking us out and following us on Spotify or whatever platform it is that you found our podcast. And if you are watching us here on the video version of our podcast at Chili Boy Productions YouTube channel, hit that subscribe, like the video, and as I said, leave all those recommendations and snarky comments in the comments below, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Cinema Snarks. Ren, where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me on Twitter at Ren Manley, and they can find me on Instagram at RennyPoo13.
Perfect. And if you want to come for me specifically, you can find me at Chili Boy YT on Twitter and Chili Boy Productions on YouTube and Instagram. So,
and if you're in the Denver area and you're interested in horror stuff, you should come see Lady Killers Audacious Theater as immersive production where you get to meet real life serial killers. Audacioustheater.com.
Yeah,
Since
make sure if you're in the Denver area, subscribe to Audacious's email newsletter so that you get the notification when those tickets are on sale and where you can buy them. And we will see you with our opinions on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.